All right, welcome back. I think this is what this channel is becoming right now, that I will go through my week, take notes during the week as I have learning moments, and then talk about it in video and just share what I've learned. And it's been around 2 weeks since I last posted because I have once again been held back by my perfectionism or idea of creating like just the best video ever. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that my taste, or I think in general with people, their taste for art develops faster than their skills. And I find myself wanting to create like amazing things that are just in my head, but I just don't have the skills or the tools to do them yet. And that actually stops me from creating in the first place, which is ironic because creating consistently is what would actually lead me towards that level of skill. So I made a visual about this a few days ago, and yeah, that's my first lesson for this week, that to just accept that good enough and completed is better than perfect so far. And yeah, that's definitely something that I want to keep in mind again with this channel and with just life in general. The second thing that I would like to mention is, and I think this is very important for young people in general, and more so young and ambitious people, that you have to embrace being confused and not knowing what you're doing. I'd rather be confused on my own path than be extremely certain or confident on someone else's. And like in a world where instant gratification and trying to be a millionaire in your 20s and flexing on social media with cars that you rented is, in a world where that's the norm, the antidote to this culture is to simply embrace that. The antidote to that is to embrace everything that they're trying to run away from. And I think what the people that try to live that life for instant gratification and setting crazy goals, I think what they're trying to run away from is being confused and being seen trying and showing that they care and that they try and that they can fail and looking like a beginner, um, and not having any instant payoffs, right? Because a lot of times you have to work really hard when no one's watching. And I think these are the things that you have to actually embrace. And the quote is that there's a quote by Socrates that I really like, and I think it's quite related to this. And it says that awareness of ignorance is the beginning of wisdom. And with that logic, if the awareness of ignorance is the beginning of wisdom, then people that run away from ever facing their ignorance have never really begun the journey. So, yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. There's also this quote by Dan Coe that says, 3 to 6 months of having no idea what you're doing is the barrier of entry to a rare life. And, it could even be a few years if it has to be, right? But I like this quote because it promises the reward at the end of it, and it kind of tells you that it's worth it and that it's normal and that it's okay. Um, so yeah, that's definitely something that I'm working on, to be seen trying, to look like a beginner, and to be seen failing, right? And funny story, I got the chance to be like an official photographer at an event at university, and it was my first time using this camera. So I bought this camera for this YouTube channel, and it's my first time ever that I've had like a real camera. And I took around, so it was a pretty decent event. It was a pretty big event. We had some professors, a lot of big people, a lot of friends. It was really nice. And I took around 500 pictures in like 3 hours, and the first 100 pictures were blurry. I was like, what am I doing? It took me like a solid, like literally took me 100 pictures in to realize that my shutter speed was too high and all the pictures were blurry. So, and it was just a very simple setting. I just had to like switch it on the camera and it was all okay. But, but yeah, but I'll show some of the pictures here now. I am very happy with how it turned out. And going to this event, and I'm also a part of this association. Um, so that's also really fun. But the reason why I really took this opportunity seriously, and I think I worked nearly as hard as I could on these pictures. I spent like 2 days editing them. I did that because I'm trying to narrow down on what really matters. So I'm trying to pick very few things in my life right now that I want to give all of my effort, and then do those few things with just extreme focus, and then see what happens. That is kind of what I'm trying to do, right? So narrow down on what matters, what's left, give it your absolute everything, and then see what doors and what opportunities can open up from there. And this opportunity to take these pictures at an event was one of those opportunities. And even getting here, I think I got this opportunity because I had narrowed down enough and I was working hard on the things that mattered. And this chance to take pictures at an event was a result of narrowing down and focusing on a few things with more effort. And I will be doing the same going forward and seeing where that takes me. And of course, this YouTube channel again is also definitely part of that, right? I want to work harder on this channel, and I've cut out a lot of things from my life that just don't matter. And I think that's a good philosophy. And it seems quite promising already, but I'm very excited to see where it goes. All right, so I was watching the Modern Wisdom podcast, hosted by Chris Williamson, and he had a guest, Paul Rudd, on his show, and he talked about how he hadn't sat down and thought about his life till he was like in his mid 40s. And the internal monologue that he shares that was going on in his head was, keep going, you're almost done, there's not much more to do, you're almost there, just keep going. And he talks about how he always felt like there were a clear set of hurdles that he had to get over, and that he just couldn't stop and think. And that was quite scary, right? Like just to be in that position where you're in your mid 40s and you realize, oh, I never stopped and thought about where I was going. And yeah, I mean, just a simple reminder to stop and think where you're going. I think I'm really trying to build productive rest and reflection into my routine, because that allows me to have these. It basically allows me to think about what I'm doing, where I'm going, and then make adjustments. And he gives an example of someone who wanted to who just finished his bachelor's and who was going for his master's, not because he loved the study or because he was so passionate about the subject, but because he didn't want there to be a gap in his CV. And that's quite depressing. And I think it's just about trying to stop your inner monologue that says, just keep going, you're almost there, because I don't think that really ends. I think that monologue stays there till you die and you realize that there was no end and you just had to not listen to it and stop and think about what you're doing. I'm not suggesting you have to change what you're doing. You might be on the right path. Um, all I think it's really worth creating consistent reflecting moments into your life, into your week, even into your day, so that you can make calculated changes into where you're going and adjustments. I have also been reading The Power of Now, um, and it's been a good book. And I will talk about a few quotes from that book. So I read that, and he says in the book that the best indicator of your consciousness is how you deal with life's challenges when they come. Now, it's hard to define consciousness very clearly. It's also something I'm working on trying to understand. But it's like, I think of it as like the good side, or the alternate, the alternative to being egotistical or living through your ego. So if your ego arises purely from the mind via mental concepts and ideas of yourself, and that it leads to disconnectedness and competition, then being higher in consciousness fosters a sense of connectedness and oneness with nature and all things, and that it might also be something beyond the mind. I would actually go as far as to say that the purpose of your life is to increase yourself in consciousness, and from a religious perspective, this is the same as a person's journey towards God. And with all this in mind, a good thing or a good deed is anything that moves you closer to God or increases you in consciousness, and a sin is anything that doesn't, or anything that does the opposite, or it moves you away. He also says in the book that you can use a challenge to awaken you, or you can allow it to pull you into even deeper sleep. Those challenges are your tests. Only the way in which you deal with them will show you and others where you are at as far as your state of consciousness is concerned. And there's a lot to learn here, I think. So what I get from all this is that who you really are is when things get difficult. That is when like the real you comes out. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, because challenges are always around the corner, and you will get to, if you can stay present enough to see your reaction and kind of not get swept away by it, but to be able to see it, then it's a good opportunity to realize where you are and how much work you need to do still, and what your weaknesses are. And challenges are, I guess, they don't just expose you to yourself, but they're also an opportunity to grow. And then you can take this idea further and apply it to like the people around you, and to see that how do they behave when things go wrong, and you can see who they really are. Well, and that's why I'm learning to really value skills like conflict resolution and emotional maturity in the people that I'm with, like the people I spend time with, the people I call friends. Like, how do they behave when something goes wrong, when a project goes south, or just someone makes a big mistake? How do they behave if you make a mistake or something? That being said, it's also really useful to have empathy when you see someone you care about behave in a way that you would not recommend. And it's also a chance for you to really help them, because in that moment is when the real kind of, you could say, weaknesses are exposed, as they are for all of us when things get really tough. And I think that the challenge exposes the wound, but that is also the best time to heal. And I think the only way you can do that is with love. That's probably a topic for a different video, but yeah, I think the best way to do that is to do it with love. And now I'm kind of connecting this to other ideas. He also says in the book, if you cannot be present even in normal circumstances, such as when you are sitting alone in a room, walking in the woods, or listening to someone, then you certainly won't be able to stay conscious when something goes wrong, or when you are faced with difficult people or situations, with loss or the threat of loss. And this, as soon as I read this, it reminded me of this clip I had seen of Chris Williamson where he talks about unchosen suffering and chosen suffering. And he says in the clip, the only way you can prepare yourself for unchosen suffering is with chosen suffering, right? Because unchosen suffering, right? Things that go wrong, that are out of your control, are always around the corner. And you never know when things are going to go wrong. And how you prepare yourself is by voluntarily facing your fears and your ignorance, right? Before you have to, right? So you choose to face it. You choose to face your weaknesses and your fears before you are forced to do so. And I think habits like going to the gym or going on a run or eating healthy, all these things are a kind of chosen suffering that prepare you for when things go wrong. And this idea of trying to stay present in normal circumstances, and how that defines how you behave or how that affects how you behave when things go really wrong is also a good thing to consider, because in the sense that you don't have to wait till you have an obstacle to increase yourself in consciousness, let's say, or to grow. You can build these things into your daily life, and you can constantly, like, you don't have to wait for something to go wrong before you realize, okay, now I can use this as a challenge to get better and or something. You can do this with practically every moment of your life, right? If you're just walking or listening to someone or at the gym, you can practice being there and trying to stay conscious. The last thing I think I would talk about in this video is I was watching the George Yanko podcast, and in one of his videos he talks about how it's like your responsibility to give what you didn't get, and how you can derive your sense of what the world needs from what you needed and couldn't find. And I think you're also in the best position to give that to the world because you know what it's like to need it and not have it, right? So you are the audience, you are the client, the consumer, for whom you're building the product, let's say. And you could like take this to a very business side of things. I think this is also the essence of building a good business, right? So you have a need and you find a solution and you sell the solution. But you don't have to build a business to apply this to your life. I think even simple things like if you remember when you like if you remember how much it hurts when you really care about something and you talk about it and no one's listening, that you tell yourself, okay, I know this really hurt, so I will make sure that when someone is passionate about something and they're talking about it, I will make sure I listen and that I do everything I possibly can and I ask them good questions and I genuinely take an interest, right? So again, you're giving what you didn't get, and you're realizing what the world needs by what you needed and you couldn't find. And I think that is a great way to build these meaningful moments into your everyday life. And I think you can do a lot with that. And yeah, that's it for this week. Thank you for watching and take care of yourself.